Property investing is one of the funnest things that you can ever do in your life, but I also realize as someone that's bought 11 properties over the last years, it can be very overwhelming and daunting getting started. So in today's video, we're going to talk about 6 things that will enable you to get started, get on your property investment journey, and give you the confidence to go out there and take action. So the very first thing you need to remember when going out there and buying an investment property is it's going to be stressful, it's going to be super uncomfortable, and no matter how much information you absorb, no matter how many mentors you go out and get, no matter how many of these videos or podcasts or Facebook posts you check out, no matter how much you watch on TV, that fear, that uncomfortable feeling that you have right now is not going to go away. And I think that's a really, really important thing to acknowledge, that it's going to be stressful. In fact, it's going to be probably the most uncomfortable thing that you've ever done in your entire life, and that's because there are so many unknowns, there are so many moving parts, and you're probably not going to get it right first time around, or in the future you're going to learn more and you're going to be in a position where in the future you're going to learn more and be in a position where you realize the mistakes that you've made on that first property anyway. So just acknowledge that it's going to be stressful. It is going to be a bit uncomfortable. That's completely normal, completely natural for you to be feeling that way. You know, we all have challenges, investors, getting started, but you can overcome that with education and with the right strategy in place, which I'll talk about in a moment. Now, the second thing that I think is really, really important if you're just getting started in property is how much can you actually borrow? So what is your borrowing capacity? And the way to find that out is to go and sit down with a bank manager or a mortgage broker and say, this is my current annual salary, or this is my combined annual salary, you and your partner. You know, this is our savings in the bank, or this is how much equity we have in our own home. And the equity is simply how much the property is worth, what the debt on that property is, and your equity is that difference in between. And so you find out how much you can borrow. And if you're just getting started right now, like this is the very first video you're checking out, and you haven't got any money in the bank right now, then the first thing that you go and do is sit down and create a budget. You know, what are the total costs in your life right now, fixed and variable? How much are you earning per week? And then you create a savings plan which goes towards that investment property to set you up and get you into the market as soon as you can afford to. But for those other people watching it that already do have the savings in the bank, or that do have good equity in your property, you know, it's as simple as sitting down with that mortgage broker and looking at what your borrowing capacity is. So you might be able to borrow $200,000, you might be able to borrow $2 million. That'll depend completely on your situation. And then from that borrowing capacity, you can sit down with your mortgage broker or bank manager and work out what type of deposit you're going to put down using your cash or your equity. So in the old days, you used to be able to put down a 5% deposit. These days, most banks are looking for a 10, 15 or 20% deposit to do business with you. So you can work out, you know, what amount of money that you have available, or if you're just getting started, what amount of money you actually need to save. Now, the third thing, which I think is very, very important, and probably the most undervalued and underlooked part of investing if you're just getting started, is strategy. Now, people don't spend enough time focusing on strategy, and strategy really dictates everything that you go out there and do as an investor. So strategy really refers to, you know, what it is that you're going to go and buy and why you're going to buy that asset. Now, that might feel really overwhelming right now, but let's break that down into a few simple steps that you can do. So if you've got a notebook, you can literally sit down yourself or with your partner and go, first question, where do I want to be 12 months from now? And if you don't have that goal in mind, it's as simple as saying, I'd like to own one investment property. Now, for some people, you might be ready to buy a property today. For other people, it might take you 2 or 3 years to save that first deposit. Regardless of where you're at, your 12-month goal should be to go out there and look at investing in a property if you can afford to. So that's the first step. The second question to ask yourself is, where do me and my partner want to be in 15 to 20 years from today? Now, I think if you don't have a goal the answer is choices in life. I want a life where I can choose to do anything I want to do without relying on a job or money to do that. Now, what I mean there is, let's say you're earning an annual income at the moment of $50,000 or $100,000, then your goal should be to replace $50,000 or $100,000 worth of income in 15 years time, so that you can spend the rest of your life with those choices that ultimately we're all looking for as investors. So they're the first two questions. I'm not from South Africa. And that is, where do you want to be in 12 months? Where do you want to be in 15 years time? The second thing is, what's holding you back from actually taking action? You know, obviously we all have that fear, we all have that stress. Some people suffer from information overload. Some people don't have a team of advisors, a mentor or a coach. Some people don't have a budget or know where to start. There's all sorts of excuses we use as first-time buyers to not do anything and to stay in our safe box and do what we know. But that isn't really going to get you financially free, and that certainly isn't going to help you buy an investment property. So you've got to acknowledge what those challenges are for you and then work through them and overcome them. Now, something that's important with strategy is also, I call them pigs, but what are your property investment goals? And your property investment goals, effectively, because property is really just an asset that gets you from where you are to where you want to be with choices and with cash flow without you having to go to work in the future. So your property investment goals should just directly align with that. Now, as an investor, these are my personal property investment goals. I want a low risk investment property. I want medium and long-term capital gains. I want great cash flow. I want a property that I can add a little bit of value to at some point in the future. I want to buy in a metro market in Australia because I know those markets perform better, or a major regional area like a Sunshine Coast or a Gold Coast. I want to buy a house because I know houses do better than units. I want to buy the biggest piece of land in a nice quiet street in a great suburb as close to the city or the beach as I can afford. I want that property to be low maintenance and low risk. I want it to be in a suburb where I can easily find a high quality tenant. And so there's some of the big picture things that I personally look at when thinking about buying for me. Maybe some of those things are meaningful for you. Maybe you've got another strategy that you want to take to the marketplace. But, you know, they're the property investment goals that I'm talking about. Now, what's important with your short-term and long-term goals, the challenges you're facing, and your property investment goals is they all just need to line up to where you want to be in 15 to 20 years from today. And that's, in a nutshell, all you're looking to do there. Now, once you've got your strategy in place, I've opened up my black pen, not my red pen. The fourth thing out of these 6 things that you need to get started, or your 101 property investing, is what market are you going to target? Now, when I talk about market, I'm talking big picture. So the market really refers to, okay, I'm going to buy in Australia, and I'm going to look at Sydney, Wollongong, Central Coast, Brisbane, Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, Melbourne, for example. You know, they're the markets that I personally look at as an investor and will continue to look at over the next 20 years in Australia. So your market's your big picture. The simplest way to get your head around which market, because you don't necessarily always want to buy where you live just because that's comfortable. The Heron Todd White Month in Review Report, or HTW Month in Review Report, just Google it. And that gives you a full wrap up of where the Australian market's at each month. Over the last, 5 years, those guys have been doing that. Or you could subscribe to CoreLogic's monthly property updates, and they do a breakdown in video format, which is really easy to learn, of Sydney, of New South Wales, of Brisbane, of all of those major marketplaces in Australia. And that's a nice place to understand your market. Now, once you've understood which market you're going to go and buy, so I know what my strategy is. I'm now going to buy a property in Brisbane. The next thing to do is look at which suburb you're going to focus on, and also what type of property within that suburb you're going to focus on. Now, obviously there's units, there's townhouses, there's apartments, there's houses, there's vacant land, there's brand new stuff. There's so many different options in the market right now. I always think the property should be a house because if you look at your history and know your history, you'll know that houses in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane have outperformed units by between 1 up to 3% per year every year for a long time now. So houses are very, very important to target as a first timer. Don't get caught up in the unit trap or the brand new trap unless you're going to buy brand new, which is a really nice piece of land in a good area and can get the build below market value. Chances are you're paying above market value for that if you're doing it on your own. So a suburb, I always look for something within 20 kilometers of the CBD / close to the beach. Now, I know again, not everybody can afford to do that in Sydney and Melbourne right now, but there's great opportunities to do that in Brisbane right now, where you can buy within 20 Ks of the CBD for literally under $450,000 for a beautiful home. You can buy walking distance to the beach for under $550,000. So there are incredible options around. You've just got to start thinking like an investor, not as an emotional, scared person buying where you know, which is 100% what I did when I was getting started. So the sixth and last thing that I wanted to talk about there is really just your team. So you really want your A team in place. And that team consists of a few different people. You need a solicitor, you need a mortgage broker, you need a property manager, you need a building and pest inspector, and for some people, a buyer's agent can also be a really, really good asset in terms of that team. A good buyer's agent should be able to help educate you on the marketplace, should also be able to help you buy that first property with confidence, physically inspect the properties for you, and help you get a great property that doesn't just do well in the short term, the medium term, but also sets you up for your longer term goal of financial freedom. So that's pretty much a wrap up for today's video. I hope you've got some value out of that. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel below, where we do heaps of cool videos for first time and established investors. We also have a podcast, which is the Pumped On Property Show, you can check out. Now, if you are seriously thinking about buying an investment property in the next 12 months and really want to look at particularly this strategy piece, you know, what are your short and long-term goals? What is your property investment goals? What challenges are you facing and what your next step should look like, and a bit of support around which market and suburb you should take a look at? Then jump over to my website, www.pumpedonproperty.com, where you can book in a free strategy session with either myself or my brother Simon. And you know, it's completely complimentary. We'll talk about where you are and where you would like to be, and share our experiences from helping people like yourself buy over $300 million worth of property in Sydney and Brisbane. So thank you for your time and attention. Good luck with your journey, and I wish you all the best.